Quanell, three topics if we get to them all. Sometimes you're so long-winded we don't. But let's talk about Donald Trump leading at the polls, right? Let's talk about a local story. Kim Ogg being censured unanimously by every Democrat precinct chair, clearly because she's holding Democrats who are corrupt to the same standard as she would Republicans, which is not acceptable in our political landscape of the day. And then, of course, breaking news this week, a conservative pundit released images of the Nashville trans mass shooter, Audrey Hale, of her manifesto for going into a Christian private school and killing small children until law enforcement thankfully killed her dead. I want to start with that. We have seen this, we're in this time in America where the media and the government are very collusive about what they release to the American people in an effort to control the narratives, right? If this was a manifesto written by a white supremacist, it would be platformed and it would be released the very next day. When we have mass shootings, like we had one this weekend, and we had yet another shooting at a HBCU's homecoming, all horrifying, and we had a mass shooting down in Galveston during the rally that apparently was not associated with the rally. But when it checks the wrong immutable box characteristics and it can't be used to demonize white cisgendered men, well, the media memory holes it. Here we have a trans woman who I think is a white woman who referred to children as crackers. She used the progressive language of privilege to condemn them to death. She talked about everything. She actually used some pejorative language referring to the small children as an ugly term for homosexual. And so it was really just a scattershot, strange thing, but it is something we should have seen in America immediately. But the media said, no, we're going to hide this from you. We're going to work with the government to hide it from you because this doesn't support what we are force-feeding people in America every day. I disagree with it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Quanell.
Well, Charles, to be honest with you, it's very obvious that this was a crazy, psychopathic, insane individual. But I first want to say, man, I'm so sick and tired of hearing these stories of these mass shootings, especially when they target kids. How sick of a monster can you be to think it's appropriate to commit mass murder, shooting, and killing kids? And that's why I believe that we should allow teachers to all carry arms on the school campuses, including nurseries. I believe that every school should have a police officer there at that school nationwide. And don't say we don't have the funding. What amount of money we're sending to Ukraine and we just sent to Israel to further wars, we got the money to protect our children better here in America. This woman was crazy. She was a trans woman, but yet made disparaging remarks toward the children using a gay slur. This was a trans woman, white woman, referring to other white people with white privilege and crackers. She was crazy. So we're looking at somebody who's psychologically insane. We have to take that into consideration. Now, the media is doing a fine job, Charles, in America, of pushing certain politically acceptable narratives that fits what they want out there from whatever particular power structure is in control of the nation or that local domestic scenery, that city or that county, their power structure. We got problems right here in Houston, brother, to be honest with you, where we're positioning stories in the media based on what party the person may be affiliated with. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. It should be balanced and fair reporting, and we don't have that, Charles. But the entire country's media landscape is going in that direction. So my opinion about that, man, is tragic, it's evil, it's awful. But no matter what race the person is, if they commit these type of crimes and they have a manifesto, release it. Stop making excuses. If they black, release it. We just had a black brother in New York, a sick brother who went on a subway and killed a bunch of white people because he hated white people, and he was convicted for that. That needs to be talked about. Let's just be honest. America has a race problem on both sides of the aisle. You got some sick-minded white people committing these crimes based on race, and you got some sick-minded black people doing the same thing. Let's put it all out there, man, so we can stop being in denial and have a real prescription of what needs to be done to address this madness.
Well, one of the problems, though, is in the politically correct narrative of the day, right? It is okay to be a bigot as long as your bigotry is pointed at white people, right? And I'm talking about overt bigots. Like our country is filled with covert bigotry, right? People that have hatred in their heart, but they masquerade, they cover it up, right? Because of the social or societal consequences for it, right? So a white person that's openly a racist, he or she will have societal consequences typically. Whereas pointing towards white people, it's perfectly okay to be a bigot in 2023. We also have these crazy narratives about culpability and consequence that if you check the right boxes. And here you have, I believe it's a trans man, born a woman, Audrey Hale, trans man, who clearly was probably hopped up on all sorts of hormones and everything that maybe or maybe not it impacted her intellect or her worldview. But horrible, horrible deeds. But you also talked about the ability to make schools safe. I don't think a single police officer is enough, but you're absolutely right. In America, we do so much for countries all around the world and so little for Americans that it's insane. Why would we send foreign aid to countries that have universal health care when we have basically no health care for the majority of Americans? Why do we not make every school a hard target? And there are some people who say, oh, I don't want schools to feel like prisons. Why don't you go ask every parent who has lost a child to a mass shooting and ask them if they'd rather the school feel more like a prison or less like a prison and still have their kid with them. Everyone's going to say, I want it safer. And we could spend the money. Joe Biden just dedicated a few $100 million to making it safer on the federal level, but this should be something addressed on the local and the state level. This should be an absolute priority because one officer, as we saw at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, well, that coward was hiding outside with his gun out like a little titty baby, right? And children got slaughtered, and his whole job was to be there. He was making six figures, and yet he was hiding. And in fact, his department was precluding other officers from going in, and there was a small town department that showed up and ran in, much like Uvalde. You had tons of officers, Uvalde school district officers, Uvalde officers for the city, you had troopers, and it took a tactical squad from Border Patrol who was being told to hesitate, who entered an unlocked door, right, and finally killed the shooter after victims had bled to death.
So why don't we just allow teachers to be armed, Charles?
Well, allowing is one thing.
And have them well trained.
Allowing is one thing, compelling them is another thing, right? We shouldn't put teachers in a situation
but let the teachers choose. We shouldn't tell them no. Give them the right like they did in 2 school districts here in Texas.
Right.
Gave them the right to choose if they wanted to carry while they're on campus.
Right.
But they have to go through training certifications and pass those certifications to have the right to do it. We shouldn't force teachers to do it, but we should give the right to those teachers who have passed the certification courses and they choose to and meet the qualification standards to carry. I would rather have my daughter, my son, and anybody else's children with a teacher with a gun in that class. And there's a mass shooter there, man, bamming on the door. And they have nothing. And the baby's on the phone calling 911 and the cops ignoring those calls. I'd rather have that teacher firing through that damn door, man.
I think every officer that showed up at Uvalde and did not make an effort to intercede should lose their license to serve as a police officer. I think for those at the top of the food chain, there should have been some sort of criminal and most certainly civil liability. It was such horrible cowardice by Texas law enforcement on a variety of levels that as a former officer, I found it disgusting. And what you saw in the 2000s, you saw this ethos of go home safely, right? Officer needed, but that's not your job as a police officer. In fact, your job as a police officer, and the reason you have a job, especially in small towns where there's not a lot of work to do, right? Where 90% of your job is just hanging out. Because during the bad times, you're supposed to run forward. You're supposed to put yourself in danger. And now in this, where you're talking about Nashville, those officers absolutely did. They immediately ran in to engage the shooter and took his or her life. You know, but for us, as the American people, for the media to work with the government and just decide, oh, well, America doesn't need to know the truth, right? And you look at this narrative of privilege, you look at this narrative of race now, you look at this narrative of colonizer, and every name that it is now okay to call people who've never colonized anything, who just happen to have light complexions, right? And it shouldn't be the amount of melanin in your skin that determines how someone looks or thinks about you, right? It should be the content of your character. It should, you know, borrow a quote from Martin Luther King, it should be your actions, which was an argument Reverend King made for years, and it's an argument that really no one is making today, right? Because nowadays, right, it's well, you know, there's this historical grievance.
But Charles, let me say this too.
Yes?
Do you realize that narrative that you're discussing right now is really being pushed by more liberal white children and liberal white activists
most
than black?
certainly. Oh, absolutely.
And it's shocking to me, to be honest with you. Example, some of these slogans and chants that have been associated with black protesters and black activists.
No, it's liberal left-wing
We
America.
didn't come up with that.
Right.
And these were liberal white activists, and they call themselves anarchists, who came up with these slogans, but it was transferred and attached to us. America,
Unfairly.
I've always said this, Charles, and I believe this. There will be a day where racism ends in America. A lot of black people disagree with me on that, white people too. But racism is going to end in America, and I believe it's going to happen in this decade. You know what's going to end it?
What?
When Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea come rolling down 59.
Well,
when Russia, China, and North Korea
doesn't
come
occur.
rolling down 59, when you see them rolling down I-10 East and I-10 West, I guarantee you won't be no race talk then, brother.
I mean, we have manufactured reasons to hate other people because we have the luxury of doing so in America right now. And it's really kind of sad. It's absolutely repugnant. And at the end of the day, you're spot on with far left. We talk about the abolish prison narrative or the defund the police narrative.
That didn't come from us either.
No, that's what I'm making that point, right? If you'll let me finish. The truth is that if you grew up as a law-abiding citizen in a predominantly person of color neighborhood with a lot of crime, okay, as both of us did, right? There are no law-abiding African Americans, and plenty of them have advocated for reforming our police paradigm, for changing how, you know, Joe Biden was always a big fan of locking up drug users until he raised a couple, right? And people don't believe that. You should go listen to his rhetoric about him wanting not drug dealers, but drug users to spend a long time in prison. And then, but the truth is that those that are robbing communities of public safety are doing their most evil deeds to low-income neighborhoods of color in big cities across this America.
Charles, but do you
and
remember?
they want law enforcement. They just want law enforcement that respects black people and locks up people
Here's
for
proof
crime.
of what you're saying. In the Watts riots in the 60s, you never heard anybody chanting defund the police.
Right.
In the Detroit riots, no defund the police. Riots in 1992 in Los Angeles, nobody ever was chanting or demanding from the black community defund the police after the Rodney King beating. It never came out after Ferguson with Michael Brown. You didn't see that come out of New York with our brother Eric Garner. That didn't come from us. America has a problem with crazy young liberal white kids. Let me tell you something. Here's proof of what I'm saying. So now they're talking about all these protests in America about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right? And they're talking about, oh, these Jewish students are being assaulted on campus, being targeted on campus, and they are. But who's doing the targeting?
Well,
who's doing the assaulting?
Mostly
Is there no black people? Is there black people?
You're right. Mostly.
No.
People,
these white people too doing this. These are white protesters beating these kids too.
I'm going to have to disagree with you. What we called mostly peaceful protests in the wake of George Floyd's murder. We've all seen the videos, not on mainstream
But no defund the
media.
police talk came out of that.
Okay, but we've seen, in like Ferguson was burnt to the ground, right? You saw Minneapolis, and no one wants to look at the before and after pictures of Minneapolis because everyone wants to believe, oh, it was just Target, it was just Walmart. But the truth is it wasn't, right? So many small black businesses, black-owned businesses, were looted and never recovered, were burned and never recovered.
Which was a shame.
And it's a horrifying shame. Now, well, if you're trying to suggest those actors that were doing the looting and burning were white, well, that's just simply not true.
Stop right there. You're wrong.
No, I'm not.
Now let's talk about it.
When
you saw the cops being attacked with pepper spray, hold on. When you saw the cops being attacked with pepper spray by protesters in full mask,
I'm not saying white people didn't do it.
They had shields on, professional pepper spray guns. These are white kids.
These were
white kids.
There are a huge number of African Americans participating in those violence
we were stealing out of Walmart. We were stealing out of Kentucky. We were stealing out of Best Buy.
The suggestion,
but it was nothing like those little white kids.
The violence was led by white people, and
the violence against police officers was not led by black protesters.
Absolutely not true.
You're wrong about that.
There were plenty of violent people of all races to go around. And in fact, the numbers would suggest that there were far more of some races than others, but it doesn't matter. Because you know what? We shouldn't look at people committing violence, shouldn't look at people doing horrible things and just, their skin color. What we should look at is people doing horrible things.
When you look
at
the protests,
I don't care if a murderer is white, black, brown, whatever.
But look at these recent protests. Look at these recent protests.
Okay.
You don't see us out in the streets with that, black people.
Well, it's not.
You see a few of us.
Right.
You see a few of us. Well, and all these threats that's going around and all of that stuff, you don't see us participating in that. But I will say this to the Palestinian people. As evil as black people had it in America under slavery and segregation and an apartheid system, we never had to kill anybody. We never had to blow up anything and kill no innocent children. We didn't have to take no white hostages. We didn't bomb no daycares. We didn't kidnap no white grandmothers, none of that. And yet we put a black man in office in America with the most powerful seat in this country, and put black people literally in every elected political position of power in this nation, and we never use bombs and rockets to do it. What is it that we could show them and the rest of the world it can be done?
I didn't know we were getting into Israel tonight.
But I just want to touch on it a little bit.
No, I mean, I'll definitely discuss it because that's the truth, right? We talk about the draconian blockade and security conditions in Gaza, which are far higher than the security conditions in the West Bank. But everyone seems to have forgotten in memory hold that they were in response to suicide bomber after suicide bomber after suicide bomber after suicide bomber. And people want to act like it's not possible to disagree with Netanyahu's horrifying bombing campaign that is indiscriminately bombing regular citizens of Palestine and calling it war, right? Very similar to America's indiscriminate bombing of Iraq, right? And at some point, we need to recognize that killing children is bad, but when people seek to contextualize Palestinians putting babies in ovens, beheading children, killing husbands, and then raping their women.
But I haven't seen no proof of that.
Oh, you see that? But that's
I haven't seen no proof of baby in the oven.
Okay.
I haven't seen it.
You've actually had.
Please share that.
You want to see the video because
they
showed it to journalists.
I have not seen it.
They showed women getting their breasts cut off. They showed it to journalists. We've had American governmental actors saying, "Hey, we've seen this. It's horrible." But everyone wants to parse it, right? But yet you want to assume the worst. Like if Israel says, "Hey, here is evidence,"
evil, right, that is in direct contradiction to the religion of Islam. Hamas is an Islamic-led group, government, terrorists, whatever you want to call them. They're Islamic-based and led. Every Muslim scholar on earth should condemn all of that, because you know that is against the religion of Islam. You know it is against what Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah taught all of us to do and to be. Nowhere in the Sunnah or the Hadith of Muhammad that we ever condone to teach something like that. But the Muslims are being silent because of the suffering of the Palestinian people under occupation. But we have never been taught to be silent when evil and wickedness is being perpetrated on any human being.
Well, the hypocrisy and how it's talked about, right? You have the leader of Hamas is a billionaire who lives in a penthouse in Qatar, and he's saying that Palestinian women and children need to be martyred for the cause. You had a Palestinian woman who was doing an interview who pointed out that the leaders of Hamas, their families have everything. We just want jobs. We just want a life. We want to be able to go to Israel, and work, right? And then someone starts choking her, right? Because, I think the victims of October 7th suffered the most, but the people that suffer from Hamas extremism on a daily basis It's not Israelis.
But do you know
it's law-abiding
Palestinians? Do you know the
Palestinians.
recent polls that took place before October 7th suggested and showed that the majority of Palestinians did not agree with Hamas?
Right. No, I absolutely. They're the ones that suffer the most.
So now it's proof that the people who are dying, that don't even support Hamas, their children being murdered and killed with these bombs.
It's horrible.
And they're not supporters of Hamas. We can't justify that.
I don't think you can.
And that's why I think that America at least did this. Whenever they decided to kill, they attempted to at least, to kill a leader of ISIS. What they would do is they would track that leader and wait till he was in a space that was not so populated, then kill him. Israel should learn from that, because Israel is losing this war in the court of public opinion. Around the world, in the court of public opinion around the world, they're losing this war.
People accusing Israel of genocide. Well, if they wanted to commit genocide, they could just wipe the Palestinians off the face of the earth.
But
it looks
like that's what's happening.
They're most certainly being indiscriminate, and I disagree with the bombing campaign. But let's talk about all the people. We had 300,000 people march on our Capitol and vandalize it, and several of our
Think
monuments.
about that, 300,000.
Here's the thing. You've seen these, they are called protests, but they really appear to be celebrations of the violence of October 7th all around the world, and so many people calling for the elimination of Jewish people, and it's horrifying. But my question is, where were those people when Syria, when Yemen, when other countries that were Islamist regimes killed hundreds of thousands of Muslims, right? So when you talk about Muslim extremism, people love to call me an Islamophobe, but the truth is, when you talk about Muslim extremism, most of it is divided between sect to sect, right?
Tribe against tribe.
Right. That one portion of the Muslim faith thinks another portion of the Muslim faith is evil. And what we need to focus on is why it is so widespread in Islamist regimes. Why there are people that you look at the Jewish people. There should be hundreds of thousands of Jews all across the Middle East and Africa, but they're not there. There's less than 20,000 outside of Israel because they've suffered genocide. Right? You like to talk about how the Jews in Israel
less than 20,000 outside of Israel.
Outside of Israel in the Middle East, there's less than 20,000 Jews.
In the entire Middle East.
In the entire Middle East.
You're wrong about that.
I know I'm right.
You're wrong
it's
about
horrible.
that. I think you're totally wrong about
because
that.
they've been persecuted and genocide.
Because right there in Ethiopia, you got black-skinned Falasha Jews that are more than 20,000 people. That's not the Middle East.
That's in Africa. So just
I
pointing
keep
that
trying
out.
to tell you, there's no such thing as the Middle East.
Okay.
There's no Middle East. Because if there's the Middle East, where's the Middle West? Where's the Middle North? Where's the Middle South? There's no Middle East.
There's no one that considers Ethiopia to be in the Middle East.
There is no Middle East.
But what you like to
Because if there is, there's a Middle South, there's a Middle North.
What you like to talk about is how the Ashkenazi Jews don't have any historical right to anything. And there's a few things people don't talk about.
Think about what you just did.
Let me finish.
You counted all of the white-skinned Jews, saying less than 20,000 outside of Israel. When if you count the black Jews all through that region and brown-skinned Jews, it's way more than 20,000 people.
What are brown-skinned Jews called?
So what? They're the Falashas.
No, they're the Mizrahi.
No, they're the Falashas.
They're the Mizrahi.
The original ones are the Falashas,
and they absolutely make up the majority of Israel. People like to talk about it being Ashkenazi, but the majority, if you divide it into groups, the Ashkenazi are about 30%, the Mizrahi are 40-something percent. But people love to talk about displacement and they stolen land. No one talks about the truth, right? That when Israel was set up, the Israelis went in there and they bought land at a very incredible premium from wealthy landowners and wealthy warlords, and their tenants were eventually for it. That's the truth. They have the records. No one wants to have that conversation.
Who they bought it from? Great Britain?
No, they brought it from Arabic landowners, and no one wants to have these conversations.
The documented proof
Everyone
is there
say,
that when Israeli settlers would migrate to Israel, they could take Palestinian land for free. And they could kick Palestinians out of their homes for free.
That is a lie.
The video's out there.
That is perpetuated.
All you got to do is go on TikTok
and you can see a
type
video
in Palestinians being kicked out of their homes for Israeli settlers, and you'll see the truth.
And I don't agree with it, right? But the narrative that it was stolen from the landowner, I'm not talking about the tenants, but the landowner is clearly false, but the media doesn't want to touch it. And at the end of the day, why can't we coexist?
So let's touch on this.
Why can't we coexist?
Let's touch on this.
Why should religion be a justification for violence? And why is it so predominantly in the Islamic religion?
Can there be peace between the two? And how do we make that happen?
Well, the Israelis have tried over and over and over again. And
Let me
there's
say
been one
this.
side that has rejected it.
Let me say this.
And it is
No.
the Muslims.
No, you're wrong.
You're
wrong.
The Palestinians have said no to a two-state solution 7 times.
The Israeli
This isn't true.
hardliners, the Israeli hardliners have rejected the peace accords too. In fact, Netanyahu even said if I accepted that peace deal, which I agree with, I would never get it past my own party.
So let's just be honest. Electoral response to terror. Most Jews are liberal or centrist, and he keeps winning because
you got
they're
a lot
scared.
of hardliners in the Israeli Knesset who do not want a two-state solution.
Right, but the majority of Israel has accepted it time and time from the very beginning.
But we're not talking about
37.
how do we make it happen? How do you make peace happen?
You make a two-state solution happen by the Palestinian people and the surrounding Islamist regimes not rejecting it every time and saying from the river to the sea and calling for a genocide and eradication.
I got a radical idea.
Eradication of Jewish people.
I got a radical idea.
Because they're all the same people.
I got a radical idea. How about the United Nations and world governments come together and let the common people of Palestine determine what government that they want in place, and do they want a two-state solution? Let the common people vote for it. Remove all the leaders. Same thing in Israel. Remove those hardline leaders and all of the leaders, and let the people decide, one, do they want a two-state solution, and put referendums on the ballot how they make that happen.
Well,
because there was a time that they did live together.
You know why that'll never happen? Because the leadership of Hamas and the leadership of the Palestinian Authority make billions of dollars every year by there being strife, right? They also are able to steward
the people also
NGO
know that.
money
the Palestinian common
strife.
people know that. They
agree.
They know the Hamas leadership,
suffer horribly.
Islamic Jihad's leadership. They know that these guys are living in Lebanon and Qatar and other countries while their children are suffering and dying on the ground. Give the people an option on the ground to make some ultimate decisions, not the leadership.
I agree. I think hopefully at some point we'll be able to get to the other subjects like Kim Ogg here in town, maybe next week.
You went too long.
Donald Trump. We both did.
No, not me. You did.
Oh my goodness. Donald Trump leading in the polls. It looks like he is, despite the efforts to remove him from the ballot, which I think is a bad idea because I think it'll result in Joe Biden and conservative.
They are willing to do anything to get rid of him.
Do you think if it ends up being Joe Biden versus Donald Trump
will win?
You think so?
Hands down.
You think America's
the economy?
There you go.
2, Joe Biden's weakness on foreign policy.
Yeah.
Foreign policy and the economy, and 3rd, his age. He's done.
So, Trump's almost as old. So, who do you think is better?
It don't look like it to me. Don't like it to me.
Who do you think is better for America?
I'm gonna be honest with you. I think the Democrats need to really run some people against Joe Biden. To be honest with you, I think they need to run some people against Joe Biden. I'm gonna tell you something else. The Republicans are no better. There are better options than Donald Trump in the Republican Party, but because they're not as extreme. Because they're not as extreme. I don't think that Tim Scott.
Okay.
Even though I disagree with him as a sellout, he's still to me better than Donald Trump. Nikki Haley.
He's the wrong complexion for the protection.
I think Nikki Haley also.
Again, wrong complexion for the protection.
Now I'm gonna tell you somebody else. DeSantis. I think he would be a better option than Donald Trump.
DeSantis seems like a little bitty troll to me. I don't know. And when you talk about Donald Trump looking younger, it's because of spray tan. I think we need to, I do agree that both parties need to get away from this senile geriatric head of the party and focus on some huge civic leaders. But here's the truth in America. Our national, our local, our state politicians, they're just feeding at the trough to make themselves rich, and it's heartbreaking. It's disgusting.
And I would have no problem if Obama decided to run again.
Well, he's not allowed.
I mean, if he could, I'd have no problem with
Michelle could run.
I'd love to see Michelle take a swing at it. Look, we need new, fresh leadership without all the baggage.
She's telling us to stop. She's been telling us to stop 5 minutes.
Because you keep talking.